Welcome back, everybody, to me being grumpy about the Wheel of Time. And today we're going to continue with The Fires of Heaven. Yes, I read the next bit. We're 2/3 through with this mess of a book, and yeah. This is chapters 30 to 40 something. 45, I think. Maybe 46. I'll double check. Something like that. The next one is definitely the Before the Arrow chapter. That's the next one I'm going to read tomorrow, I guess. Yeah, I'll put it in the title. You'll know already because you clicked on it. Wonderful, right? Anyway, let's get wheeling, shall we? Well, cheers. All right. Basically, it's a mess, but nothing too new happening, right? And this is sort of what I said yesterday, and it'll kind of continue. And I'll have something that I wanted to say yesterday, but I feel I can still put in today as a starting point. So in what I talked about yesterday, there's one situation about where what's her name, Egwene talks about how she how the Aiel wise ones are treating her, and how they're like very much into like senseless physical labor as punishment, and that led me to a bit of a revelation there. It's like and that is Robert Jordan, obviously, as we know, and I've mentioned this before, was a soldier. He was actually in Vietnam. And everything, like, when it comes to teaching and discipline in these books, reminds me a lot of, like, I've never been with any form of army or done anything like that because, reasons. But what I want to say is that the way that discipline is, like, made clear here, even with the wise men of the Aiel, reminds me very much of all those cliche drill sergeant kind of cleaning the toilet with a toothbrush kind of things. And I'll just like claim that that's where the inspiration comes from. And while I totally understand why and how Robert Jordan is, using his personal experience there as an inspiration, it just, I guess, kind of feels weird to see that in the context of magic school. I mean, Harry Potter never had to clean the bathroom with a toothbrush, but then again, I don't know what to say about that. It's just like, I guess that's sort of part of that bit, and we see the Aiel in general, like how they are described. A lot of that feels very much like Robert Jordan pulling at his experience from like the actual army with like skirmishing and all that. It feels a bit like that, and I'm fine with that. It's definitely not the worst bit of the Wheel of Time that I've encountered so far. So, yeah, there we are. We still basically have the Rand plotline, and we have the girls plotline with a bit of stuff in between, but that's sort of where we are in the chapters of today. No Siuan Sanshea, still no Perrin. I'm wondering if Perrin will actually show up in this book at this point. I'm like, doesn't have that much time left. And not much else either, so yeah, well, and like plot-wise, there's once again like basically no plot, like not a lot of plot stuff happening, and yeah, that gives me like more time to be angry, I guess, and annoyed. Because basically what happens is we get like a lot of circus stuff. We have an encounter with the Prophet Masema and Uno, flaming bloody Uno, which is so funny. Like Robert Jordan, man. I mean, come on, right? Uno says says bloody, flaming, bloody, whatever. Robert Jordan has the goal, the audacity in the year 1994, which is sort of the same year in which Game of Thrones was published, right? Robert Jordan has the audacity to say the man couldn't say a single sentence without the vilest of curses. I mean, come on. It's just ridiculous. And that's sort of like the problem I have with a lot of this is, we've spoken about how these things are super crude, but I just like had to laugh about this one. So yeah, Elaine and Nynaeve hang around with the circus. Rand and gang march onwards to Kyrian, and that's about it, plot-wise. I know it's not that much. Obviously, we need to talk a bit about or not really that much about the whole Brigida incident, and we'll talk a bit about the meeting Massima, the prophet kind of thing, because I think we can look at specific aspects of what is wrong with the Wheel of Time in those kind of stories, especially in the latter one. And we obviously need to talk about Rand and the short spear, or like Rand getting laid. Yes, Rand gets to fuck. I know Robert Jordan doesn't use those words, and there's obviously stuff to that story as well that I find kind of weird. But yeah, what can you do? All right, let's start with the fucking, and then move on to the other stuff. Rand finally gets it on with Aviendha, which we kind of knew would come at some point, and obviously there's stuff happening there that is, I don't know, mainly the construction is a bit over the top, right? It's like they teleport through that portal onto the Seanchan continent, where people ride fucking flying dinosaurs, which is really cool. Seanchan are really cool. Well, not the Seanchan, but the continent is really cool. That world is way more fun than anything we've seen so far. However, Aviendha is obviously naked. Rand walks in on her, and because she's also in magic school, she just opens a portal and jumps onto Mount Everest, basically, and runs around in a snowstorm. Rand saves her, and in a world where everyone is using magic, the only way he can warm her is obviously by, undressing her and undressing himself, and creeping into a magic igloo. Yeah, makes sense, right? But, I've seen worse offenders when it comes to finally setting up that situation where people get it on. So I'll just leave it with that. Then we obviously go away from what actually happened there. And there's an interesting thing here that I've kind of mentioned before. I feel it's very apparent in that scene. Now, I personally don't mind if we don't have explicit sex scenes in a book. I'm fine with a lack of those. The whole idea of just making clear that we know what is going on and people are getting it on, and then we just move on to something else, because an explicit sex scene is very, very difficult to write because it's such a personal thing. It's probably more personal than most other things. I've read good ones with, Richard K. Morgan comes to mind with both A Land Fit for Heroes and, of course, the Takeshi Kovacs Altered Carbon series. He's a big fan of describing the whole thing in detail. I've read terrible ones. George R. R. Martin is a big fan of really shitty sex scenes, or and I'm pretty sure there's people out there who would read it the exact opposite. So I totally respect any author who says, what? I'll make clear what's going on, and then we just move on, because you don't need to read that. If you want explicit sex scenes, go watch a porn movie. It's fine. So I don't mind that bit at all. What is interesting is that after that, the way Robert Jordan mentions it or points back to it all the time is weirdly prudish and naughty at the same time. It's a super weird combination of making all these 13-year-old boy illusions and stuff that 13-year-old boys would giggle about, or used to giggle about before we all started watching porn on our mobile phones at age 7 or something around that. But you know what I mean. It's like, ooh, he said boobs. Stuff like that. It's really infuriating, because it's completely unnecessary. Yes, 2 adult people have fucked. Fine. For whatever reasons, which, you can probably explain in world, the next thing that Rand talks about is, oh, I fucked you, or now we need to marry. And while that is obviously horrible, the idea that that is the case is obviously horrible on a general level. I can understand, because he's a conservative boy from a conservative backwater. I can live with him thinking that way. And then we get like a long conversation on like why that is not the case and whatnot, and all throughout that, we get all these weird situations that are basically just so he can point out that Aviendha has boobs and an ass. And I'm like, yeah, gods, either go in or don't, but don't, just like, it's super annoying exactly because of that weird combination of prudishness and, always and horniness. It's like a 13-year-old Catholic schoolboy or schoolgirl like way of thinking about these things. It's weird. Anyway, so we get that bit out. We kind of learn that Aviendha saw when she did her Wise Ones thing, which was going through those 3 rings and seeing 3 different versions of her life, kind of thing, similar to what the Accepted Aes Sedai do. And she saw that she would like fuck Rand, or maybe more. Because of course these things are fated. No one falls in love with anyone here because, they just actually genuinely are attracted. It's always because it's fated. Fucking fate in these worlds. There is no free will in the Wheel of Time, I guess. So yeah, we have that scene, but it's still an interesting thing because it sort of explains all of like Aviendha's behavior. It's like she saw that she would get it on with Rand, and she's like, no, I can't, because obviously he's for Elaine, and him and Elaine are an item, and I can't go in there between my best friend and this dude, and that's okay. I would have preferred to actually have Aviendha's point of view of the whole thing. But then again, looking at how talented Robert Jordan is at describing the mind of a woman, maybe it's better that we don't have it. Just seriously. But yeah, so we got it on there. That's fine. Actual fucking is finally happening, and we don't call it cuddling no more, so we're good there. Well, we don't call it anything now, but I guess that's a step forward. So yeah, I just felt we needed to talk about this weird combination of setting it up as this super awkward scene, because you can't just get it on in that in that bedroom, right? You could have just like, oh, he walks in, she's naked because he's washing, and they're like, ooh, and then they get it on. No, they have to run across like a different continent. Well, yeah, there we are. Now let's move onwards to other and more important, or not more important, but other annoying bits. So, the circus. Oh, right. Now, I guess we should talk about the Brigida incident, because there's another aspect to that as well. The humiliation thing remains. So, they go back and do like the dreamy stuff, not before we also learn that obviously Nynaeve gets punched by other people, because it's important that women are punching each other all the time in these books, or spanking, or hitting, or whatever. And, Nynaeve goes back, she meets Brigida, she sees part of a conspiracy of a bunch of Forsaken, basically the gang of, what's their name, Lanfear, Samael, Ravine, and Grendel, planning to, lure Rand into a trap. Like Samael kind of baits him to actually attack Samael, and as soon as he goes that direction, the rest just link up and do stuff. And yeah, so that's interesting information, and the way it is, actually conveyed is cool. Although I also see the problem that because of what happens then, Nynaeve completely forgets again, of course. So no one gets actually warned about the whole trap for Rand. We just know as the reader. But what happens is Moghedien attacks her, and then Brigida saves Nynaeve and gets catapulted out of the dream world as a full-grown woman. And yeah. It's an interesting plot development. is what how I would describe it, what I would call it. It's an interesting plot development, and I'm mostly fine with it. I just felt it should be mentioned. Now, there's a bunch of interesting things. One of them is the magic system still doesn't make any sense. What do I mean? Apparently, people can learn using the source. People can learn using magic by just watching, because Elaine has learned how to bond waters by watching other Aes Sedai doing it. So she can just do that. Then there's other things that she watches and just can't learn. When it's convenient, she can do stuff because she watched someone else. When it's inconvenient, she can't. Also, when it's convenient, she just looks at an item and learns how to do create ter'angreal. So, whatever. Apparently also possible. However, now Birgitte is Elaine's warder, which is illegal, but at least she's safe, and now they have another good-looking woman that can hang out with our other two with the circus. Yeah. The whole Nynaeve plotline remains weird, and we're gonna go back to that in a second. Have a full-on, thought about Nynaeve. What happens is obviously the circus moves across the river into Gillidan, where suddenly there are all these other circuses. And isn't it interesting that apparently there's at least 11 circuses, menageries, with all these crazy animals, artists and whatnot, acrobats and shit, all in the same place. And this is book 5, and we've been to some fairly big cities before, right? We've been to Caemlyn a bunch of times. We've been to Cairhien before. We've been to Ilion before. We've been to Tyr. And we've never heard about the fact that there are menageries, traveling menageries, and suddenly there's 11 of them. I'm sure there's an explanation somewhere. I just can't see it, and I'm just saying it's a bit odd, but I kind of see what he's trying to do, so yeah, I'll just ignore it. This is not the place to point out the inconsistency of Wheel of Time's world building. That's a whole nother thing. So yeah, the important bit, however, is that we have a long conversation on what dresses women are allowed to wear and what dresses they are not allowed to wear. And that is, it's actually shitty as fuck. Once again, right? We've said that before, and I can see, not that this will ever happen because I don't have enough subscribers, but these videos will totally never get monetized, as angry as I get about it. So here's the thing, right? The entire story is they are in the circus now, so they are supposed to wear some sort of costumes and maybe some figure revealing costumes. And you could totally make an argument about how, having all the women dressed up as attractive to the male gaze as possible. So for them, is a problem, or is is part of the objectification of women under capitalism, because that's basically what it is. They have to dress as revealing as possible, so more people run into the circus, and what's his name, Luca, I guess, gets money. And that's a mechanism you could criticize as much as you want. Now, I'm fine with that. But what happens is that the entire fucking discussion about who gets to wear what kind of figure-hugging dress or not is once again an internal discussion, or mostly internal, even internal monologue or thought process of Nynaeve, in this case, about what is proper for a woman to wear. And they're yeah, I would totally wear this tight dress with a huge cleavage and everything, that reveals everything. I would totally wear that, but only for my man and no one else. And that's the problem. It's if you want to criticize the fact that women are dressed, that women's bodies are used for, for monetary gain by someone else, or exploited by the owner of the circus, who's incidentally a man. Of course, he is a man. In this world, you could totally do that, but what we see at the end of the day is that it is like the person deciding what is proper to wear and what is not proper to wear for a woman is always a woman, and her argument is never but I want to wear this shit because I feel sexy or whatever. In that, it's it's not proper to do this except for my man, Lan in this case, and that's once again what it does at the end of the day is reduce and like actively reduce women once again to the property of men, even though at the same time they're denying it all the time. But that's exactly what it is. Like, yeah, I'll dress sexy for my husband to be, who, or like, because it has to be a husband in this world, but I'll dress sexy for him. And everyone who does that because they feel well, they're all sluts. I'm like, you even have that whole thing with Berlin, what's her name? Berlin and all these people. Like, so much for women's emancipation. Doesn't happen in this world. It's always in there, built in, and that women have to wear proper clothes, and they have to do that unless they're dressing up for their like dedicated mate. And that's shitty. That's really shitty in that world. It's like, because there is no need for that. So yeah, there's that bit. And we still, obviously, at the same time, like everyone ends up in the dresses that Robert Jordan has invented for them. Of course they do. And we get a long explanation of like how much Elaine shows her legs and stuff. And I'm like, isn't the entire circus scene just there for Robert Jordan to gratuitously describe female bodies? It sure seems like that. So, yeah, I don't know. That bit I just felt annoying because you could have done something proper with it, but he doesn't. He just like goes like, you know what? When we have Matt and Rand on the ship with Tom in book 1, they'll do a bit of like learning to like defining the characters more and doing a bit of acrobatic stuff on the side. Now we have the women, so what we do is we talk about boobs and how they are shitty to each other, and that's it. And that's, that's nothing I didn't expect, but it's still annoying and frustrating that it is that way. All right. Now let's look at the next bit. Nynaeve walks into, what's the place? I've already forgotten. Some city in Gillidan. Sanara, Sasara, Samsara, I have no idea. Something like that. That city. Who fucking cares? She walks into that city, and she meets Uno, who is watching the show, and then Uno recognizes her, and she recognizes Uno, and they walk to meet the prophet, who is obviously, old soldier Massima. They have an interaction with him, and Nynaeve at the end of the day gets him plus Galard to promise to each find them a boat to Salidara so she can drag everyone to the Blue Aja. Fine so far, right? Let's look at the bits. Oh, just one small one that I really enjoyed. When Brigitta becomes like archer for like the circus, and it's like, we're gonna name you Brigitta, and she's like, no, I don't want to be Brigitta. That's a bit too cheeky because obviously, no one knows that she's Brigitta. The circus director Luca doesn't know, and she's like, I want to be Marian because I was Marian before, and yeah, there we got ourselves something of a Robin Hood story in there, which I like. I want to just, say I'm happy that I got a Robin Hood reference in there. So Good on you, Baba J, for that one. Now let's look at the Prophet. There's two things there. There's a small one, which is just fucked up capitalism going down. So Massima is talking about needing money for the poor and so forth. And the Queen of Gillidan gives him her rings and all her gold so he can use it to spend money. And Nynaeve, good capitalist that she is like, in her mind, obviously, that is very bad because she'd rather have someone give their own money than someone take from the rich and give it to the poor, because that is not sustainable and would just make everyone poor at the end of the day. And that's wrong. Sorry. I am sorry, but expert on gender roles and cultural and gender role expert Robert Jordan is not an expert on economy. I'm sorry. And I just found it interesting to say, like, the platform of charity sucks. There's no way that actually taking from the rich and giving to the poor works. Like, even poor people should give for poorer people. But, I guess this is sort of the end of, like, the Reagan trickle-down idea, or sort of like that. So you have to, make this voluntary and not compulsory, I guess. Yeah, well, there we are, however. What can you do? It's not a big deal. I just found it interesting that it was explicitly mentioned that that it's wrong to take stuff from the rich and give it to the poor because it will make everyone poor. Because this feels very much like someone read a bit of the wrong economic books. Like, leave that shit at home. Don't go neoliberal on me, Bobby J. But I guess it was to be expected. Now let's look at Massima. Massima is the prophet, and suddenly following Rand has become a religious thing, and he is almost identified with the creator and all these things. And don't get me wrong, I like the idea, in general, in theory. So we have this prophecy, he is the Muad'Dib, he's coming back, we get religious panic or religious fervor, and it will lead to all kinds of stuff. That's an interesting, or not interesting, but that's, in general, a good plot line. That's a realistic idea for, like, a development. It's like, if that prophesied savior of mankind shows up, you will have people who will try to, build their entire existence on it. And they will even be, try to tell other people how to live in the name of that savior and so forth. I can live with that. My issue is that it just felt really shallow. Like, I mean, it is the Wheel of Time, I know, right? I can't expect anything more than that, but it just felt super shallow to the way Massima just knocks out those couple of phrases of the light will do this, and you have to be, the Lord Dragon will be there for the light, and you have to live in the name of the light and the Lord Dragon. It's like, yeah, but why? 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 It's like, follow the Lord Dragon, fight against the darkness. Sure, I can live with that, but all the other stuff feels like, there needs to be some sort of justification somewhere in there, and that's not there, and that's missing. And that's like a larger issue with the entirety of the Wheel of Time. The entirety of the Wheel of Time is so far an extremely shallow book where, like, motivations, cultures, or anything are concerned. You want religious maniacs, they'll just talk a bit about purity. We'll never define what purity means, because we'll never define anything of that. When we talk about cultures, we'll just talk about what kind of clothes they wear and what funny accent they have, because that's all you get to see of the culture and of all of that stuff. We never go beyond that because we don't want to look at actual customs and where those customs come from and how those customs develop, or are they connected, how they're connected to something. We don't do that in the Wheel of Time. We just use the pretty colors on the front and just expect you to accept that. We'll go into exhausting detail on those colors, though, so don't worry. So that's something that I found really annoying with Massima and the Prophet. As the Prophet, it's like, yeah, we never really got a full-on like explanation of like why Massima became so fully over the top kind of devoted and zealous where Rand is concerned. That was never like fully explained, but maybe it was just like that scene at Toman Head at Fulmar at the end when he's like sees Rand run around in the sky and shit. Yeah, maybe. But then he just like walks off and does this thing and just makes up a religion that he doesn't explain. Also, we know it's religious madness because he changes his mind all the time. It's like, and this is, I guess, another issue there. It's that idea that religious fervor has to be like in constant madness, and it's not like he can't just like be like, yeah, we're gonna make this as, you know, we're gonna make a solid organization out of it. No, he has to be like, you know, jump around and be sort of insane. Everyone just like follows him around. And it's like, have you ever studied any form of religious movement, Bobby J? Have you looked at how that shit works? I assume not. And yeah, it continues from there. It's like, what's her name? Nynaeve is like, yeah, I need this boat, and they're like, yeah, you'll have one, and I'll talk to someone. We'll make sure that this will happen. He just like, he never feels to me. Massima never feels to me like any form of realistic religious fundamentalist. He just feels like a cheap maniac. And that's just like a missed opportunity, I feel. So, well, yeah, there we go. There's obviously the usual stuff. It's like how men always eat like just spiced meat and nothing else, and never eat all the healthy vitamins, and women always want to eat healthy vitamins, and all of that stuff. But we've gotten used to it by now. It's just there. Nothing to be done about it. It's just the way Robert Jordan sees the world, I assume. So, let's look at the annoying bits and pieces before we leave it for today. One of the annoying bits, also one that we have seen before, is when Moghedien gets hit by Birgitte. She wakes up. We see a Liandrin situation where Liandrin tries to use that moment of Moghedien's weakness to maybe strike Moghedien down, which obviously doesn't work because... well, we don't know. It's just that Liandrin has her comeuppance and gets treated by everyone else like shit, which is mostly getting beat up and humiliated and turned into a slave that has to be treated like an animal because Robert Jordan loves that. And yeah, I don't know what to say about it at this point anymore. It's just like annoying as fuck because we've seen it so many times. Like, every woman that is evil will have a situation where she is undressed and hit by other women and humiliated and, you know, mostly put into bondage and treated like an animal. It's like, yeah, if you're into that kind of stuff, I'm fine with that, right? I don't kink shame. It just feels weird that the entire book uses like physical humiliation as the only like response to moral failings, basically, which is kind of cringy at this point. So yeah, there's definitely another like discussion that we need to have ourselves here, and that is the one about Nynaeve's character, because there is the whole idea that Nynaeve blames herself for what happened with Birgitte. There is the idea of you know, who is actually responsible for Brigitte's actions. Birgitte claims that it's her because, you know, she decided to actually help Nynaeve and go into danger and so forth. Nynaeve doesn't accept that because Nynaeve thinks that she's responsible for everyone, which kind of makes sense from her background of, you know, being the wisdom of Emond's Field and having all that responsibility. And that could actually develop into a really, you know, interesting discussion of responsibility and authority and how those things connect and the costs of those kind of things. But unfortunately, that's not what happens because, you know, we're talking Robert Jordan here, we're talking the Wheel of Time here, so he misses that opportunity, and it boils down to Nynaeve has to become an arrogant bitch again, or you guessed it, Birgitte will spank her. It's just like, I mean, come on, motherfucker. Not every problem in this world can be solved by spanking people. I don't think so. So yeah, the overall idea of Nynaeve being in charge or not being in charge, and we mostly see that stuff through Nynaeve's point of view this time round, is interesting because it is just like one wasted chance after another, right? There were a lot of like good ideas in Nynaeve's character to start with, right? Her, you know, feeling responsible for everyone in her town, running off to get those kids back. That was believable. Her deciding to, actually still oppose or go along with them to make sure that Moiraine cannot really exploit them anymore. That was still reasonable. Her still kind of trying to find some, form of responsibility, or trying to, yeah, still feeling in charge of those younger girls or men or whatever, that's not wrong. It's just that the way it is written is once again so crude. It's like there is no actual reflection there, because Robert Jordan seems to not be capable to actually write down any form of like actual reasonable thoughts at this point. I don't think so. So it just is like frustrating, because there is such like there is potential there for like really interesting thoughts and ideas, and he just like wastes all of them again. However, it's all about the bodies. It's all about like who looks good and who looks better and who is willing to show how much of it. And then be chastised for Nynaeve, who obviously also wants to do the same thing, but only for Lan. Yeah, well, that's sort of why, once again, this whole thing feels so boring right now. Is like nothing really happens except these kind of things that we've seen here, like what is like find opportunities for Robert Jordan to talk about how women feel about clothes and and their sexuality, which he obviously is an expert on, and then just I don't know, yeah, do more of the same. I mean, the entire middle of this book could have just been cut out, I feel. Apart from that, yes, I mean, we're in with Rand and all his way to Cairhien. It also is like, yeah, officers suck, ground troops are smart, Cairhien and Tyrian nobles are all assholes, because all noblemen are assholes. There's an interesting observation about like the bowing and scraping. That like apparently court forms of etiquette are seen as a sign of weakness and corruption. And that's an interesting aspect in this book, because this book is overall is extremely conservative and concerned a lot with with like forms of behavior. But the interesting thing, I think, is that you see the small-time conservative, American conservative shine through in that, which is, the blue-collar conservatism, is like actual forms of like etiquette of the upper class and the elite are always a sign for corruption, are always a sign for, weakness, so to speak, effeminacy. There's definitely always that idea of like that those elites at the courts are sort of effete and sort of not fully manly men that go out and grow tobacco and stuff like that. And that feels very much like what you see in your contemporary conservative, right-wing conservative populist movements, which is all about the common people who are honest, they don't bow or kneel for anyone, and they do the things that like. It's interesting to see that shine through here, when every time like those court etiquette is mentioned, it is mentioned with that bias that it's sort of a sign of corruption and untrustworthiness and so forth. But yeah, we'll see where all of this is going. I assume that tomorrow we'll get the full-on battle for Cairhien and the showdown with Couladin. I hope so. Um, we'll probably see the girl school wander up the way to where it is, Solidar, and meet up with Swan and gang. And I still have no idea where the whole thing will end up. This at the end of this book, it just feels sort of like going nowhere right now. But maybe something interesting will happen in the near-ish future. It just feels sort of lackluster at the moment. However, I'll go back. I'll do the next bit of it tomorrow, and we'll see how much I can actually get out of it. Until then, have a great, well, for me it's Tuesday, so have a great day. Cheers.